So we're the food culture group. We're here to teach second graders. So I'm Reagan.
My name is Maria.
My name is Mariola.
My name's Lauren.
Okay, so I'm one of your reading and writing teachers. So the standards are on top, and we would keep those there throughout the lesson. And then our learning goals are that students will compare their cultures to other children's cultures. Students will reflect on things important to them. Oh, we missed the agenda.
So sorry. So first we're going to show you the schedule so you know what's going to go on. My name is Miss Maria. So first we're going to have morning meeting, and then after we're going to have reading and writing. After that we will have a little brain break, so we have the little puzzles or like dance break to students. And then we'll have social studies. And then we'll have math. And recess, our lunch. And at the end we'll have a field trip to Milwaukee, and then it'll be dismissal.
Hi again. I'm one of your reading and writing teachers, Miss Reagan. And so just going over the learning goals again, here are standards. Then the learning goals is students will compare their cultures to other children's cultures. Students will reflect on things important to them. And students will learn new words.
Okay, so for the reading and writing lesson plan, we will first have a show and tell. So the day before, students were asked to bring in something meaningful to them, so like a teddy bear, or maybe a candy, or anything that they felt was really important to them. And then after that, as a class, we would read My Food, Your Food, Our Food. And after, as a class, we would look at the glossary and we would define the words together. The book is about different foods around the world and how it's important to fuel their bodies and how food connects everyone. After that, I would ask them, what is your favorite food? And then we would make a chart and have each child vote on their favorite food with and we'll tally it. And then at the end, the groups, we would find out whose favorite group won. After that, they will complete a work, All About Me book by adding and decorating the food and home pages. The following day, they would be able to present their favorite page and share it to the class, and we would display it in the classroom.
So the About Me book consists of all these prompts. So including favorite clothes, pictures of themselves, their school, and inserting like a actual photo of their family, and then drawing a picture of their family, and then drawing a picture of their pet or dream pet if they don't have a pet, and then insert a picture of that pet. They can look one up online or like an actual picture of their pet, and then a drawing of their home. So it's all about what is important to them. So we brought in some foods that are like important to us and some like our cultures. So we're gonna pass this out right now, and like students would be given that option during school as they bring up like their favorite foods, their favorite things as well.
So 2 pieces here, 1 piece, because then.
So some of the snacks that we have Chinese snack. I don't really know what it's called.
Just sugar.
Yeah, and then we have Mexican candy, and then we have just regular candy.
Okay, so as you pass out food, I just want to like talk about people because we did the chance to work on their writing, and it gives them a chance to be creative with their drawings.
You're judging me.
And that's all about me. So now we'll move on to social studies.
Hello, I'm your social studies teacher today. So our learning goal is students visit different locations, places in the workplace, understand their differences in food and culture in different parts of the world, and recognize the characteristics of the place, and able to distinguish them from other places. So we focus on activity. So the activity falls in our purpose. So different cities and locations of the world I'm going to divide students into small groups, like 3 to 5. And then make them to discuss at school and go to another station. There's a crossing station. And follow the paper we call city card. So on this card, yeah, we got cities, like there's a introduction about cities, so like culture, the food, the people, and the landscape, the weather, everything. So after each group draw the city card, they can discuss in a small group. They can do more research online. And then after that, we share the information on this card. Like
When I bite it, it's just like, I don't like it. Like, I like it. I eat spicy all the time.
So I think this activity, they can understand and
I'm going to get mad if they're eating too much spiciness.
So I'll be your math teacher. The standards are at the top. There's going to be like the measurements and how to use them. Activities, students will look at measurement worksheets and then they will have a hands-on activity using the measurement tools. So for this one, they'll be able to look at the measurements tools and then how much each measurement can hold. And on the right, on the left, they'll be able to see like the measurements abbreviation, and that'll help them see like on recipes what each measurement is. And then they'll be able to have measurements in class and see how much each can hold and how to measure.
I'm your special ed teacher. The purpose for the special ed room is for the students to finish their worksheets for each subject. If students are distracted, their teachers can support finishing the students' work in the classroom. For a field trip, we would go to the folk fair in Milwaukee, where there are a lot of different things to do. There's a variety of food, music, and dancing that will be at. This allows each student to learn about cultures within different foods around the world. Here's the website for more information about the field trip. Lastly, this is the standard that connects our lesson.
Yeah.
So in regards to the food, like bringing in the snacks and stuff, is candy a good thing to bring to second graders? You know, like it's sugar, and what would the school district say? You know, like, oh, there's too much sugar for the kids. It's not, you know, I don't know, just thinking of different options.
Yeah, I think part of it too was like, I think in an actual classroom, we might have some more food like back there, like we might have some more cultures, but like we just weren't really too much able to do that. But I know like Carrie food was like specific to her culture as well, but I do understand what you're saying with like too much sugar, and like that might have to be like spread out through the days as well. So thank you for that.
I guess we were just trying to different why for those who want to music in class to present the lesson, or just thinking a little math for a second grade class.
Right. I think some of them more like it's like the reading and writing for sure. That's the one Maria and I made. Like that was more just to explain to you guys what we would be doing. And then like if it was an actual like classroom, we would simplify it, especially for second graders. Not reading.
That makes sense. We were just
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Adding on to what Ms. Gomez said, some parents don't let their kids have candy or sugar. Or like, some kids have allergies.
Okay, I think that's a good question actually. I think that's something too, like maybe like going back and like correcting the lesson plan more is like looking like maybe asking kids like what their like allergies are and if there's anything they can't have, and maybe even sending an email home to parents and asking them like this is what we're planning on doing in class, like is there anything you don't want your kids to have? So like including the students and parents in that conversation.
and then go for it.
So I said, since like another option instead of candy, maybe you guys could bring fruits from different places, and that would be nice. It's healthy as well. That's an idea.
Right, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. My bad.
We got questions a little bit.
Oh, my bad.
And then how do you guys like navigate with like food allergies and stuff, like bringing in food? I know sometimes it can be difficult for like younger people like food allergies or severe allergies.
Well, she just brought up how they would email the families to see what allergies the students have, or what they would want the kids to eat.
And like, I know I've been in a crack before too, where like the student can't have peanut butter, like, but like not in the classroom at all, because like even if he smells it, it's bad. So I think that's something important to know too, like, let's say there is somebody who allergic to peanut butter, like you can't be exposed to it, then like just not bringing peanut butter at school. So just like really having that conversation.
This is great. Just before we all exit, it's important to know like how to use an EpiPen, or sometimes things happen, and things that I wouldn't have even thought of until, because I bring food to the class, and it's like it could happen like, oops, somebody is allergic. So that's another thing to train. All of you should train for EpiPens and CPR. That's my suggestion.
My name's Kenzie. We're doing the Civil Rights Movement and Black History Month and also current events. I'm Campbell.
I'm Tana.
I'm Anna. I'm Chloe. And I'm Courtney.
So we are doing a 5th grade classroom, and this is like what our 5th grade hypothetical classroom looks like. So from 8 to 8:30ish, we're going to do just a morning meeting and like warming up the kids to get started for the day. And then we're going to move into reading and writing, and then from that we're going to go to history, and then we're going to do our band and choir, and then math, and then we have our fine arts, and then we have lunch and recess, and then we'll have science, and then a flex period, which is like a homeroom / like study hall type thing, and then we will have this until 3 o'clock. So this is like what we did to start our day, is just to talk about like a question of the day. It has nothing to do with school or anything, but ours was, what is the weirdest food that you've ever eaten? And you guys can even think about it right now and come up with a weird food that you've ever eaten. And like this is our way of attacking it, like just getting the kids like open to communicating with each other and their classmates.
Okay, so from 8:25 to 9:15, we will have reading and writing. So during this time, we'll introduce Martin Luther King Jr. We'll discuss a little bit about what stands out about his speech and who he is, and then we'll explore some quotes about him. And then finally, we'll end that off with understanding the power of speaking out, which I think is very important in today's society. For a finishing activity, we'd invite students to write a speech together or in pairs about a social justice topic they feel strongly about. And then we'd come together at the end to share out and discuss what you liked about your students' speeches.
Okay, so for history or like social studies, that's going to be from 9 to 9:50. We have an activity, it's the Black History Quilt. So the standard is that students will evaluate a variety of primary and secondary sources to interpret the historical context, intended audience, purpose, or author's point of view, and describe the intended purpose of a specific primary or secondary source. So on the last slide, you saw 2 pictures. Those were 2 different books. So for the day, we would explore these little legend books and read them in pairs or as a class or however that would best work. And then students would choose one Black figure that stood out to them and that they would like to learn more about. They're going to find more information on that figure's age, job, what they stood up for, using books or resources. On a piece of paper, they're going to write why that person is exceptional and why they should be talked about. And then, with all of that, each student will help assemble a Black History quilt, which is this picture here. So we'll have a picture and then like a little, like the name and like a little excerpt on why they think they're exceptional. They could do this as like a drawing, poem, whatever they feel they can express best. And then they would share out who their person was and the impact that they've had on history. And then this is kind of like something we could show on the board while students are working, just to keep them on track, so that they don't get confused or lost with the instructions. And then we would have band and choir, just to kind of go into the schedule. We don't have like a lesson for that.
Okay, and then I am the math teacher, and we're going to be talking about the money divide. So I want to talk with my students about currency. Back then, just like in history in general, we can like choose a specific date. We can choose multiple dates. And then now, and then we talk about real world situations and then some shopping. So then one of the questions I would ask is like, how much money do you have today? How much would that get you 100 years ago? Let's compare. So then I found a link where you can like do currency comparing, and I would have the students like, I would want to do this as like a full group activity. We could all like compare it together and talk about that. And then we're gonna have 10 minutes to work on the following word problems. So I would just have like these 3 word problems out on the up on the screen while they're working, and they can do it on scratch paper, but they'll partner up and work on that, and then we'll come back together after and talk about our answers.
Can I chime in here?
Sure.
Just say, also note that the names that they used for the activity as well. It's also to diversify your lesson plans. So using different names that are not commonly heard. So
And then for a challenge that I thought would be fun is find the prices of foods or necessities now, and then find the prices of them in the currency comparing website that I found, and then talk about the differences we found. So like I just made a list of things that they could look up, like how many things that have been around for a while, and they can compare what money would look like back then versus. And then you'll go to fine arts. Alright, so for science, the standards are on the bottom, just kind of small, so that like staff could see them. And then I wrote I can statements that we would read together as a class so that students know what they're expected to learn that day. And then we're going to read this book called Farmer Will Allen and the Growing Table. Will Allen used to be in the NBA, and now he lives in Milwaukee and has an urban farm. So this book is like super up close to home. Students can read about something that's happening in the state. So then I would go over some questions here just before we read, like a pre-discussion, to see if they notice anything about the cover, if they know who Will Allen is, if they know what a growing table is, and then just like a share out. And then these questions would be on the board while we're reading so that students know what to look for as the teacher is reading, and then we come back to them later. Post-reading, yeah, we would go over those questions, and then here's just a short like interview with Will Allen so that students can like see the face to the character in the book, and he just kind of talks about his farm. It's a short little video. And then we have a discussion on urban farming versus rural farming, since the book is about urban farming. Some things that they notice, what are the differences between rural farming and urban farming? Have they seen any of them in real life? And then like the activity would be a school compost. So we'd start with like discussing composting and why it's important in the Think, Pair, Share. Then they would like put sticky notes on the board with ideas that they have about what composting could look like at school. So how could they promote it and what might it look like? And then they'd end the day with getting into small groups and just making posters that would advertise their composting around the school.
Okay, so then next was our flex time, so they can just work on things from the lessons before or look at like book boxes or just kind of wind down for the day because it's right before dismissal. And then our sub plan was to watch the movie Akilah and the Bee, and it's about a girl who is going to like the National Spelling Bee and kind of her journey on like how she gets there and the support that she gets from her community and her teachers. And then during the movie, the students could just work on like using descriptive words to describe some of the main characters and work on like identifying like the climax of the movie and like the plot line.
So, well, a couple of things. One observation, going back to the timeline or the schedule, is this, well, one, I don't see any transition time in between times, in between the things, right? Like, so like, is this all being in one classroom versus switching to different classrooms? That's one thing. The other thing, the content is really, really great. But I feel like it's too little bit of a time given the students and the discussion and the writing and stuff like that. So in each of them, in the history and the science and math and all of that, I think it's really, I really like what the topics you have for the day. But I don't think it's enough to do, like enough time to discuss all of those things or give the students that thinking power. Mm-hmm.
I just think for the schedule is very hypothetical. So if in real life you would have to take like 2-3 minutes off start time and end time, they could do that for transition, but also in elementary school, they primarily stay in one classroom most of the time unless going to something like band and choir. And then, what was the second part? The time, right?
Yeah.
I think that, well, my experience, and I think what we talked about is most elementary schools have like 50-minute blocks just because like their attention span might not be as long and like, things like that, they need to keep moving. So I think if we did run out of time, like we wouldn't rush the lesson or the stuff we made up, just the next day might have to cut in some more time with the next thing and just push it back a little bit.
And that's good observation. So the difference between elementary and middle school and high school. So, any other questions? Feedback? Yeah.
Just more of a comment. I like that you like had that very detailed like sub aspect of it because I don't think all groups like all of that, like including that. And like the fact that you had it very like this is what they should be doing while they watch this movie and not just like handing the sub movie and being like, okay, here you go. Like I like that you put that extra thought into the sub aspect of it.
I'm Grace.
I'm Shannon.
I'm Jorge.
I'm Mandy.
And I'm Gabby.
I'm also Grace.
And we decided to base our lesson plans today all around the theme of space. So this is what our schedule looks like for now. I like how, where's she at? You mentioned transition time, so we're thinking about adding that in as well. But we start off with me at math at 8:30, everyone's favorite time to do math.
And then they'll come to gym class with me.
And then they go to art with me.
And then we'll have lunch and recess and then have music.
And then after that, we'll have reading with me for social studies.
And science and writing with me.
So this is our guiding question for math class. I'd have students read it to start off with and engage in the lesson, so I'll just read it for now though. It's how do astronomers locate ever-moving constellations? And then, Grace. First I would want to know, since this is the first lesson of the day, I want to know what they know. So I'd ask them to just give me a rough definition or tell me some fun facts, everything they know about constellations, just like an open conversation to start off with. And then I would go into more of the detailed lecture lesson plan. So what we know or what we decided to come up with was that constellations are groups of stars that are imaginatively connected. And then different cultures have developed different constellations in order to reflect their spiritual beliefs.
But however, there are 88 official constellations that are recognized by NASA and other global science or space stations. And then what I really want my math students to focus on are the last 2 points here. That constellations don't move within the sky, but we are moving, so it looks like they're moving. But because the constellations aren't moving, we're able to graph them, and that's actually what professionals do in order to find constellations. So beforehand, I would have already given my students a lecture, a more dry lecture of coordinate planes, ordered pairs, line segments, rays, all of that such. But because we're going to be graphing different complex structures, I wanted to give them a quick review before we got into the meat and potatoes of the lesson. So they would watch this 5-minute video. We don't have to watch it. And then this is a slide that I would show on the screen to my students, and there are the ordered pairs that we would graph. I would have a couple students come up and graph each point on the board, and then after doing so, they would get this, which is, does anybody know what this is? Yeah. So then they would be able to match what they had graphed with their packet of constellations that are existing. And then the standard wants students to be able to graph by 1s, by 5s, and by 10s. So then I would give another example of this graph by 10 is counting by 10s here. So then I'd have them repeat the process, do the same thing again, and they would come up with this. Does anyone know what this is before?
Orion?
No. It's one of the, yes.
It's just a major? It's
Oh,
a
no.
constellation?
No, it's, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's one of the astrology symbols. So yeah, my kids in middle school are constantly talking about astrology.
Sagittarius?
And whose signs, yes, whoever said that.
Sagittarius?
Yes. They're constantly talking about astrology, so I thought I'd throw that one in here. And then after math, we'd go on to Phi-Ed just to give their brains a break.
Yes, exactly. So here's like the essential question, the goal, and then the standard that the students would follow. I probably have this up on a whiteboard somewhere in there so the students know what to expect for the day and what the ultimate goal is. And then so the first activity, this would probably be spread out between like 2 days, so because I have 2 activities provided. So this first one will be on the first day and the second one will be on the next day. Here is like the directions for it. I know the directions are kind of lengthy, but I would plan to put this on like the classroom website or send it home in like a newsletter to the parents in case like the kids like the activity and they want to do it at home with their friends or with family, etc. But so for this first activity, the equipment needed is cones and then soft dodgeballs. And then so cones will be set up marking where the planet boundaries will be that the students, which would be like the aliens in the game, will be moving around in. There will be 2 meteor throwers that are standing around the outside of the planet and moving around. And essentially those meteor throwers are trying to throw and hit the meteors at their students, I guess, their classmates, and get them out. And once you get out by the dodgeball, you are then also a meteor thrower on the outside until all the students on the inside of the planet are all gone and captured. So that's what we do on day 1. And then for day 2, it's meteor battle. So the students are going to be split up into 2 teams on each side of the gym. And there's going to be like big yoga balls or like any sort of, I guess, ball on the inside. And then students are going to be throwing meteors at those, or rockets at those balls, and trying to move the meteors onto the opposite planet's area, if that makes sense. And so once they move the ball into the other planet, that other team would get a point. And then after a point is earned, they would just reset and then start all over until one team gets to 5 points or so.
And then we would go into art, and so the goal would be students will create a visual representation of their constellation. Students will understand the meaning of their constellations and be able to share the meanings with the class. So the lesson, I called it, so it's our classroom star map. So each student would get a different constellation,
With that, they would get an image of their constellation, the name, and a 1 to 2 sentence meaning. And then moving on, as I had said, students would each be given their own separate one. And then they would be given materials such as construction paper, pencils, colored pencils, paint, and the material to stitch their constellation in the piece of paper should they choose. So that kind of correlates with the standard for this age in art class, wanting them to be creative in their visual representations. So this is more of an open-ended activity. And students would be expected to create this 3D representation of their constellation, kind of basing it off of what they've learned with other classes and what they understand it to mean, and then we would hang them up around the classroom for the entirety of this unit while they're with their other teachers. And then after that, they would get to take their constellation home with them, kind of looking at tying what they're learning in like their core classes and with their fine arts stuff. And then they would go into lunch.
And then after lunch and recess, so at music class, so the goal is using instruments to help focus on sound waves in space, and then that's the music standard. And then, so I thought of an idea of like where these are boom whackers. I don't know if I would ask them a question and I would say, do you know what boom whackers are? What do you think they consist of? And such like that, and have them answer questions. And then after I get them going with boom whackers, then I would explain how they are related to space and how like the sound of certain like boom whackers, like depending on the length of it all, like how it sounds different with it being longer or shorter. And then I would go into an activity and I would talk to them about how I'm going to have them be broken up in groups of 4, and then I'm going to have them use props and then video record their song and create a song about space so that they can like see what it's like, and then if they feel comfortable they can present it live in the classroom. If not, then just present so all the other classmates can see what they've come up with. And then that would just be the end result, like the boom whackers. It's just a video that shows what the boom whackers, like what sound it makes.
So for social studies, I have the standard up here for contextualization, and then basically I would have the students become informed about individuals, groups, and events regarding like historical change or continuity. And the goal would be for students to learn about constellations and also learn about the Great Bear, the Ursa Major, which is shown right there. For the activity, it would be a reading activity. So I would have the students basically do popcorn reading where I would start to choose, well, I would choose someone to start, and they would read at least one sentence, and then they will choose someone else. So I would at least have them actively listen to their classmates instead of just having me read it to them. That way I can see who's engaged, who isn't, and also if they're actually taking the information. I was also looking into other reading activities that had sources that would also translate into other languages, but I couldn't find any updated versions. So I found one that would be reasonable for a teacher like myself who's going to focus on bilingual education to be able to translate it also, so I could not have any reading gaps for other students if they didn't really know English. And so as you can tell, we're going to stop here to read, and they're going to make an inference regarding the reading. And so that would be like our segue into the last part of the stories of Ursa Major. And towards the end of this reading, we'll have like a reading discussion. Again. And so this is the first paragraph. And basically, I would have, obviously, each student read one sentence. Grace can hit it again. And then I would have like an image right after that goes along with that reading. So as they're reading, I'm just going to have our slides show a visual aid along with the reading so that they can also have something they can see and relate to, because constellations and like topics that are so broad can be hard for them to contextualize. So as you can tell, the other part also has a picture after that, and I would obviously stop and be able to like explain to them like Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, and that also makes a reference to like the math lesson that we had earlier in the day. and go on from that and towards the end of the reading, and then also have other visual aid where it actually explains how the Ursa Major also points to the North Star and how that also correlates with like indigenous groups and like their folklore in terms of the stars and constellations, and in this case, a part of the Big Dipper right here, the 3 points are technically the hunters in a lot of indigenous culture and folklore, and the rest of the constellation is the bear. And so that would be like a segue into our introduction of indigenous people and their contextualizations between their own understanding of the world.
Okay, then we go into science, and for science, we're going to go on a field trip to the MMSD Planetarium, and for the purpose of this field trip, we are at the closest elementary school possible to the MMSD Planetarium. So they walk into class and they see today's schedule, so walk to the planetarium, arrive, start our program, which should be about 15 minutes long. Once that's done, we work on our writing activity, walk back to our classroom, and then they'd be dismissed. And then I have my goals up there in a good place. Okay, then the writing activity would be if I were a constellation. So they'd be able to draw their picture of what their constellation would look like, and then provide some information of what the name of their constellation would be, where we could find their constellation, and just give as much detail as they can about their constellation. And then this would be after the program. So if we don't have time for this writing activity, for whatever reason, it can be moved to the next day when they come back so that we can enjoy the field trip as much as possible.
Do you have questions?
What grade are you guys teaching?
Oh, we should have said that.
Yeah.
It's for a 5th grade classroom.
Okay, because I thought you guys were teaching like younger kids, and you guys ended up using like long-term words that I was like, do little kids really know the definition or the meaning of that word? But I guess okay. Yeah.
So just a little observation, and just for cultural purposes, thinking about, I think it was the first one, the aliens part of it, I would personally change, if there's another word to use instead of aliens would be great, just because of, you know, might relate to something else, right? It's just like using something else, like my outer space friend, or, you know, outer space neighbor instead of aliens. So just to put that out there so kids don't feel like, oh, well, people call me, you know, like my parents are, you know, illegal aliens. And like, what does that mean? You know, like, or something like that, you know, just thinking about that.
Thank you.
It's not a question, it's a little bit of feedback. I really like the fact that you took into account trying to look for a translation or a different worksheet for bilingual and other languages, because I think especially growing up, kids are still trying to really figure out their language, as it could be what they learn in school could be different from their home. So I think that was something like really important.
Thank you.
Okay, so we did third grade, first of all, and then our main focus or overall question that we wanted to tie in throughout the whole day was, how can we learn more about and relate to Hispanic and Mexican heritage? So for our schedule for the day, we're going to start off with reading and writing, and I'm Bailey.
My name's Maddie, and I will also be doing part of the reading and writing.
And I will be doing the social studies, and I'm Dahlia.
I'm Allison, and I will be doing music.
I'm Maddie, and I'll be doing math.
My name's Ryan, and I will be doing science.
And my name's Lexi, and I'll be doing the special education aspect.
So for our topic, our first thing that we wanted to focus
Focus on was, in what ways can we learn about other cultures through writing and sharing experiences? So we picked two standards. One was for reading and one was for writing. Our reading standard is recognize genres that make connections to other texts, ideas, cultural perspectives, identities, eras, personal events, and situations. And then our standard for writing was conduct short inquiry projects that build knowledge about a topic. Our objective for our students is for them to get a better understanding of people from the Hispanic Mexican culture and how important they are. So for one of our activities, we're going to read the book Pepe and the Parade. This book kind of talks about the different celebrations of Hispanic heritage and how Pepe celebrates with his family. We could ask our students some questions as in what does Pepe do to celebrate, like in the book when they're reading. Can you pick anything out that stood out to you that you thought was interesting or that you enjoyed?
And then we would shift into doing a Dia de los Muertos activity. And so the past couple slides, this is not what we would be showing the students, this is just for today. We would have had those standards and the objectives like written on the board to have throughout the class for other people to reference. But for today, this is just how we wanted to display it. So we'd have the students fill out the worksheets about tradition. So they're very guided, there's facts, there's sources, there's things like that. So we would have them do research on their own, but we would provide the links that they have so it's still under our control. We know what they're looking at and making sure they get the correct information. And then with the research information, they would write a paragraph. So this is where we kind of wanted them to kind of go on their own and have a little bit more creative freedom, I guess. And then we would have a take-home worksheet, and that is about my culture and traditions. So this is more about them. So we would have them fill in these boxes at home when they can talk to their families or whoever they're with. They can learn about their own culture this way, and then they can bring it back to school and share about their own family and traditions and teach each other more about how all of us are different, but it's all a good thing.
And then for social studies, they will be watching this short video. It's about 18 minutes, I believe. It's pretty informative and it's not boring. So, you know, attention span can be a little challenge there, but I think they would sit through it all. And then, so first they would watch the video, and then the objective for this activity is for students to be able to determine the difference between Mexico and other countries regarding celebrations to honor their ancestors. So right as they watch the video, on the next slide is they would get a worksheet that looks just like this with those questions. So they can also, those questions are to guide them a little bit and think about the similarities and the differences, so they can write down as they go. So yeah, then they would fill that out as they're watching the video. So then after they are done with the video, they would get with a partner so they can talk about what they all shared or some people did not see. And then for some students that get done faster, I would add a third circle. They could add a third circle and they could research on their own a different holiday or celebration that also honors ancestors, so they can just challenge themselves with that. Okay, for the music, we will start with kind of the creating aspect, where students can watch a video on ballet. It's a local Mexican folk dance, and is known for the authenticity and beauty of its costumes and dance. So they'll just watch the video. And then the perform aspect, they're not actually going to perform, but they can kind of play with the idea of performing. They can make homemade maracas. This is kind of a picture. They're just made out of like plastic eggs, plastic spoons, and some tape, so it's very easy to make. And then after they play with the maracas, go to the next slide. They kind of respond with, they can interpret the meaning that the music has, and after playing an experience with maracas, students will be able to explain their personal preference for music selections by identifying music elements that generate personal interest. And then they will end the music notion with connecting everything all together. Students will read this book, which will describe the cultural uses of music from different periods and places.
So I have the math lesson.
objective is students will learn to convert dollars to pesos, and they will learn more about Hispanic heritage through vocabulary. And the standard I chose is applying properties of operations as strategies to multiply and divide. So we'll first start out the class with discussing what they know about pesos, and then like going over the definition and how they're used and comparing them to US dollars. And that'll lead into the next worksheet, which you can see on the right. It includes converting US dollars to pesos and the other way around as well. And that supports the standard because it shows how multiplication can be written as division and vice versa as well. And then after that, you would go through a sample problem on the board involving the same mathematics but using vocabulary from Hispanic heritage. And then after, I would give them a worksheet with that as well. And then some example vocabulary words are at the bottom. So some countries, maybe some words from Pepe and the Parade from the book that they read earlier, and dances or music that was learned in the music lesson.
All right, and then we are moving on to science. We are going to do a lesson on the monarch butterfly. The two science standards that I picked out were reproduction is essential to every kind of organism. Organisms have unique and diverse life cycles. The other science standard I picked, when the environment changes, some organisms survive and reproduce, some move to new locations, some move into transformed environments, and some die. The objective is students will understand the monarch butterfly's migration and life cycle. I would start off the lesson plan looking at this photo. This is taken from a monarch butterfly reserve in Mexico. These are actually monarch butterflies that are all huddled together in these trees. Next slide, please. And then if they couldn't quite pick out the photos of the last one, I have these ones as well to start discussions. The questions would be, what do the students notice, what they see, if they have any experience or know anything about the monarch butterflies. Next part of the lesson would we would move into a video. I would hand out this worksheet here. This has the 4 different life cycles of the monarch butterfly. Some questions on the worksheet as well to assist with students to take down notes about the video. This video covers the 4 life cycles of the monarch butterfly as well as their migration pattern down into Mexico. Then the final activity would be for the students to map where they live, map a location in Texas, and then find a location where the butterflies end up in. I connected this with our topic because a lot of indigenous peoples in Mexico believe that monarch butterflies represent the souls of their ancestors returning to visit them for Dia de los Muertos.
And then for special education, the topic that we're doing is viewing historical art from this region. So students will be taking a field trip to the National Museum of Mexican Art. And I also included a link if they're unable to go, and it's just like a virtual tour kind of thing with all the artwork and different biographies like for the artists there. And so the objective is for students to explore art and make connections with Hispanic and Mexican art. And the standard I chose was explore and make connections through comparison of artwork from personal, historical, and contemporary artists. So then the lesson plan would be for students will learn about Hispanic and Mexican heritage and different artists of Hispanic Mexican heritage. Students will then visit the National Museum of Mexican Art and reflect on different types of art from this culture. So the students will have a follow-up assignment after visiting the museum, which I talk more about on the next slide. So I included some examples of artwork from the museum. And so students will explore the museum and make connections to all the different types of artwork. And that could be like from paintings, literature, dance, photography, 3D art, digital media, and lots of other arts there.
So students will pick one piece of artwork and pick an artist to learn more about as an assignment after the field trip. So when they're at the museum, they'll be thinking about like, oh, which one they want to choose and learn more about that specific piece of art and the artist with that. So students will be reflecting on the art and artists from Hispanic Mexican heritage with that.
And then we just came up with an optional sub-plan as well. So we decided to do the movie Coco. So in class we watched this in Spanish, which I thought was very cool. We just have the subtitles on, but it's an option to watch it either way. And it only takes like a couple hours, so this could probably go over 2 days if needed. And then there's some different worksheets that could go along with it. So we have a word search that has English and Spanish words. And then this one has questions, so they could have these while they're doing it or after, whenever they need something to work on in their free time.
Sweet, yeah.
I just have an observation.
Yep.
I wish I learned a lot of this stuff when I was in elementary school because nothing cultural was involved. So I think it's really nice that you're putting, and this goes with all the groups too, like putting culture and all these other things inside the classrooms, make it that much more interesting, and like giving the students attention with like, oh my gosh, I know this, you know, like, hey, we do this at my house, or like something like that, or like, I've wondered the same thing. And I think that's, you know, I think in all classes anywhere is when you put that little bit of culture, no matter what it is, it's much more interesting for the student.
Anybody else, comments, feedback?
I really like how for the, I think it was science, you had a photo of the tree with the monarchs, and I thought it was just a photo, but then you went into depth about it, and I thought it was really cool how like you can just think a photo is just a photo, but it has a bigger meaning to it. I really like that.
Like I said, David, there's other things that that you all can do with your lesson plan that we talked about when we all pitched it. Like again, using butterflies to talk about migration and humanize migration.
Yeah.
So again, you all did a beautiful job. Oh, yeah.
I also really enjoyed how you went into the backstory behind the monarch butterflies and how that has to do with our culture as well, because a lot of people don't associate butterflies with being Hispanic.